The logical extension of that is that there's another 3 days of these releases to go. So that would take us till Friday night, Saturday morning for this ceasefire. The question, of course, is what happens then.
It's technically the final day of the truce. The feeling is it that there could be another couple more days of this?
Yeah, I think we're moving in that direction, actually. I was skeptical at first, but my colleague Anshel Pfeffer has been told by sources close to the negotiations that the Israelis are now, suggesting another 2 or 3 days. Their assessment is that there were altogether 100 women and children who are the first priority in terms of getting them released, in terms of these hostages. By tonight, we should have had 70 of those returned, 50 in the first bit of the ceasefire, and then 10 a day yesterday and today. So that the logical extension of that is that there's another 3 days of these releases to go. So that would take us till Friday night, Saturday morning for this ceasefire. The question, of course, is what happens then.
Yeah, well, we might get to that. Not that I think we actually can fully be aware of it yet. What are we hearing about the treatment of the hostages? There's been some desire by Israel for them not to talk very much about what's happened to them. The son have spoken to the dad of one, a 9-year-old girl who was kept silent by Hamas for 50 days. I saw a story of a French 12-year-old who was beaten up and made to see videos of the murder of Israelis. Are we still hearing much about the treatment of hostages?
Yeah, so the Israelis were quite sensitive about this because if you remember right at the beginnings, the Hamas released 4 elderly women who they'd taken, and one of them was kind of not exactly mobbed, but was interviewed by journalists on the door of the door of her hospital, and it was felt that I think that the end result wasn't very dignified, and there's also a fear that they might be forced to say something that endanger those still in captivity, or indeed give away information that Israel, might want to use for intelligence, and they don't necessarily want Hamas to know everything that the hostages are telling the Israelis, I guess. They also may not want to have a narrative that the Hamas treated the hostages well. The stories of how they were treated are very varied. Clearly, you hear there's a kind of assumption, perhaps because of the way that the attacks unfolded, the extraordinary brutality of those attacks, that they would also be brutalized in custody or in captivity. And there doesn't seem to be a mass brutalization of the hostages, and nor would, in fact, you expect that. Obviously, if you're going to use hostages as an exchange, you've got something that's of value, and that needs to be kept alive and reasonably well looked after, because they're going to go home at the end of the day. There were some instances you've heard of people being beaten as they were taken away, and some sort of acts of kind of what you might call sort of casual cruelty, like showing that 12-year-old videos of the massacre. On the other hand, the captives were properly fed as far as the hostage takers were able to. They clearly had food supplies stocked up in advance for this hostage taking, but ran out of food as the rest of the enclave ran out of food. Some had access to medical treatment, though in some cases not adequate medical treatment. So there are still some of the particularly older hostages who are still receiving medical treatment in a hospital, days after they've been released.
What about this this 10-month-old, the youngest hostage, 10 months old? It's just barely conceivable, and a 4-year-old. Is it because presumably we're getting the children being handed over? Is the fear not that Hamas don't want to hand them over, but they might not actually know where they are to hand them over? They might not even be alive. Very horrible thought, but that's presumably possible as well.
Yeah, the family of these 2 children gave a very sort of heartrending press conference yesterday. They talked to us about what happened to his family. It's this, as you say, a 4-year-old boy, his 10-month-old baby brother, their mother and their father were all taken. The family, there was quite a famous video. They have very red hair, these two children, and the video of them being taken on the back of a motorbike with their mother was quite a striking image from that day. The family are obviously very distressed that they haven't been released and can't understand why. I mean, yesterday we had 10 older women released, women aged between, 17 was the youngest, technically a child, all the way through to 84. No children as young as this are still being held. So the family are trying to work out whether this is some form of psychological torture, whether they're being held because they're so distinctive as a group, as some sort of final bargaining chip. The baby was the youngest child taken on the day. The Israeli army says that their intelligence suggests they've been handed over to a group called the PFLP. Now, the PFLP is a small splinter faction of the PLO that some of us of my age remember from the sort of more extreme terror tactics that used in the 70s and 80s, but is now a kind of very minor faction in the whole Palestinian scene, and is not even Islamist like Hamas and the other main group, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, are in Gaza. So it's not quite clear why they should have been handed this particular group, whether they were involved, this faction was involved in the events of October 17th, or where they come into it at all, really. Whether that's going to be an excuse for Hamas saying that somehow they lost control of this family and as you say, don't know what happened to them, or something worse. We just don't know. It's a very grim experience for the family, who are worried about them.
Yeah, it's just awful. And before you go, Richard, all along it's felt like there's been this date. The Israeli military have been telling the Times, Friday is the date when the pause will end. The numbers you've given today suggest sort of Friday, Saturday. Either this will carry on for a long period, an almost indefinite period, which no one really thinks will happen, or something starts up again. Do you have a sense of what? I mean, this is just speculation, Richard, but what might happen? What might be the thing that starts up again once the pause stops?
I think the ground invasion, whatever we call it, will continue. There's still clearly a significant number of Hamas fighters in northern Gaza. The Israeli military have relevant parts of northern Gaza encircled, but they don't have control of all of Gaza City or all of the Jabalia refugee camp, and a couple of other neighborhoods. So they will continue to attack those places until they have control of them. And then they will have to decide how on earth they're going to try and go after the Hamas leadership, which is now thought to be in southern Gaza, where, of course, most of the population of Gaza is now concentrated. They were all told to leave northern Gaza, and though not all of them did, most of them did. So you now have possibly 1.7 million people, civilians, crammed in this tiny area of southern Gaza. And somehow the Israelis have to work out how to go in there and carry out their plan of eradicating Hamas and its leadership, who are still there.